Hey everybody, RWegmann with the Wegmann team, your local mortgage lender here in Rockwall, Texas. I'm with Sizemore, an appraiser that I've known, quite some time now. He works with Sizemore Appraisals, is that right?
Sizemore Appraisal Services.
Services, LLC. He's also a local appraiser, and we just kind of wanted to bring him on, talk about appraisals. It's a topic that I, as a lender, talk about with my realtor partners, with borrowers pretty frequently. They get them confused, or you guys confused with inspectors and just weird rules and the blending of FHA loans or just government loans in general to conventional loans and kind of what goes along with that. So what kind of prompted me to reach out was, and we were talking about it before we started recording, is that I had a conventional loan going, and the home looks great, everything was great, except the smoke detectors were pulled down off of the ceiling. Now the boxes where the smoke detectors go were pulled down, and the smoke detectors were just put into a drawer in the kitchen, right? Mm-hmm. And the appraiser did the appraisal subject to. So these are subject to repairs that need to be taken care of before we can proceed essentially with the loan. We have to have an as-is appraisal, as you know, to kind of move forward. So this has to be done. We have to get this fixed. So I reached out to the agents, and you have newer agents to the industry or just agents that haven't run across the particular situation. But I told them, hey, this appraisal is subject to putting the smoke detectors back. And her rebuttal and the seller's rebuttal was, no, this is a conventional loan. This isn't a government loan. We don't have to do that. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, pump the brakes. Although conventional loans are extremely lenient, they're not, completely like just ignoring safety and structural things. You have to take care of these.
Correct.
So I sent them the guidelines saying that if it's a safety or a structural or another deficiency, they have to be corrected.
Sellability or marketability, there's the three criteria that we search for. Like you were saying, structural integrity, is it safe to even be inside the building? Safety in general, electrical, broken glass, anything like that can cause an issue. And then is the deficiency that the house has, is it affecting its marketability?
Yep, yeah,
so
exactly.
with refi, it's hard to prove that because it's not exposed to the market.
Yeah.
But with a sale, if you've got a home that's been on the market a long time, you can infer that, hey, that's probably the reason because of this, this, and this that you've called out.
Yeah, exactly. So, I sent them the guideline, educated them, right? And then, which made me think, man, I need to get Ace on camera here talking about some of these things, because really, people need to educate themselves, and they don't generally take the time to kind of go out of their comfort zone and ask questions and that type of thing. And so, hopefully, we'll get a lot of the questions asked and answered during this whole thing. So, the first thing I usually get asked by a borrower as we're moving into purchasing a home is, what is the cost for an appraisal? And what I tell them, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we as a mortgage lender, when we send an appraisal out to an appraisal management company, the fee that we put on there is just like our starting or asking price. Like, hey, can somebody do this for this amount of money? Very rarely will you have an appraiser come back in low. Most often they'll either accept the price or they'll come back and request a higher amount for it. And what I know, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, if the property is larger, there's a lot of land going on, there's multiple buildings, there's just a lot of square footage or whatever it may be, you as an appraiser can be like, listen, man, I'm not doing this for $650. This is gonna be $1,000 because I'm having to drive to BFE. This is a 10,000 square foot home. There's a lot going on. And if you want a quality appraisal, which I'm required to give, I gotta charge more, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, so.
That's correct. Generally, and every appraiser does it different. There are some AMCs that have a set fee, period.
Yep.
And you either accept it or you don't.
Yeah.
Most of them will send it over with a fee, and then you accept it or you counter and say, okay, like you were talking about, this home is 10,000 square feet. I'm not going to do it for, say, $325. It's going to cost me this because measuring it, if it's on acreage, how far am I going to have to drive for comps?
Yeah.
I mean, I had one that was on 150 acres, and I crossed like 7-8 counties looking for properties that are similar.
Yeah.
So that's how I build it out. The only one that is you can't unless you get approval for is VA. They send it over. It doesn't matter if it's a 900 square foot house or if it's a 10,000 square foot, $4 million house. That fee is set, and they have that sheet. That's what they go by. You can request additional if there is a legitimate reason Sometimes it's accepted, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, yeah. So I had a unique situation happen on a loan where an appraiser couldn't find a comp, right? And so the VA actually set the value, which is a rare occurrence. You don't see that very often, but they set it. And
it happens more than you think.
Really? Well, so for me, I never saw that. And then we had a deal. Gerard Bourne was a realtor on it. The previous company couldn't get it done because they couldn't find a value. And I'm like, what are you talking about? VA will literally do that. If there's not a comp, they're gonna set a value. And so sure enough, they did, and it went. And maybe it's more common now, or has it always been pretty common for them to do that?
I've seen situations where an appraisal was submitted, Tidewater was invoked, which means for a VA, that's basically us telling the lender, the data that I'm seeing, I can't support the contract price.
Yeah.
So we initiate Tidewater. The lender then reaches out to the agents unless they specify they want us to reach out to the agents specifically.
Okay.
That gives them, they say, provide us 3 comps that you use to do the house. We've had situations that I've seen personally where comps were provided. They weren't anywhere remotely comparable. They were just looking at it, hey, these are high prices. That's what we're going to use. We submit the report low. They then go through a reconsideration of value, but that never comes back to us, or an ROV is what they call it. At that point, I have seen VA assign a value above the appraised value.
Yeah, that's crazy. But it's called an NOV, notification.
When they issue the NOV.
Yeah. So we had that done. We got the loan done, which was, for Gerardo, like, holy crap, I can't believe you guys did that. But it's just knowing guidelines and what can kind of go on with it. So I'm sad to hear, because I haven't got to use you in a while, that you moved away from doing the FHA and the conventional and all those other loans.
I occasionally will get one that'll come through. I mean, if they pay a reasonable customary fee, which is what the law states, that was one thing that changed when UAD went into effect, is you have to pay a reasonable and customary fee. Well, what ends up happening is if they get a pool of people that are just getting their license or just getting certified, or they're slow, they'll accept a low fee. And if they get enough people, they can say, this is what the reasonable customary for this market is. But you got to realize there's probably 8,000 to 9,000 appraisers just in the DFW market.
Jesus, Mary and Joseph.
It's insane. It's crazy.
Yeah, but the thing is, and I don't think people realize this, I mean, even though there's an AMC, I mean, the AMC can't go through and appraise them themselves. They're really relying on the appraiser pretty heavily. Correct. And what an AMC is, it's an appraisal management company. So we as a lender, really not supposed to have any contact with you as an appraiser. We send it over to them. They
regarding
find an appraiser.
value.
Yeah, correct, value. So, and then they'll reach out, they set it all up. It just kind of keeps that buffer, and that kind of all went in effect, in 08 when the mortgage crash kind of did its all weird thing, and we got heavily regulated, which is good. I appreciate that. But with an appraisal that we've had with you every freaking time, it's spot on. It's like you're really going over this thing top to bottom. And I can tell you that on appraisals, I feel like I'm constantly going back and requesting revisions or changes. I argued, we were doing a HE loan, which is just a second, and the appraiser cited 2 comps, right, that that they adjusted it for value that showed a higher appraisal. So it was like they showed 440 on one and like 450 on the other, but did the subject property at 400. I'm like, huh?
What was his adjusted values?
Well, it adjusted that, yeah. So, but then the subject property was larger in square footage, better condition, had like all of these things had changed. And so this was just the desk, I guess, like a desk appraiser, like they were trying to do that. They were trying to do it.
Was it a desktop?
Yeah,
so
desktop type. He didn't go out to the house. He didn't go out to, right. So we tried to argue with this appraisal management company, trying to set a value almost essentially. So then we had an appraiser go out. It came back at 450. I'm like, see?
I don't do desktop appraisals.
Yeah. But people do, right?
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's common.
No, that's the big thing now. When COVID happened, everybody wanted to go to exterior only. Like, don't knock on the door, don't measure. And I was like, the problem with that is you don't know the interior condition. You don't know any of that information.
Yeah.
And to me, that's very specific, which is why I am so against when somebody comes at me and says, hey, I've got an AMV, which is automated, or AVM, automated valuation model.
Yep.
And it says this. I'm like, okay, well, what criteria is it using?
Yeah.
It's just pulling a pool and averaging them and saying, here we go.
The data that it has online, essentially.
Correct.
Yeah. And we as lenders can pull that. Realtors, I think, can pull it as well. And yeah, it's really pretty far off. And I think if you're trying to sell a home, you really want a full appraisal to come back, because it's going to support the value that the house is. Mm-hmm. And if you're just accepting the value of a desktop appraisal or whatever it's going to be, man, you're really cutting yourself short, to be honest. So what made you really want to switch to just doing VA? Was it just the the pricing that you were being
I
paid with?
didn't necessarily switch. I just started removing myself from a bunch of AMCs because I was taking so much time responding to bids when they weren't even remotely close.
Yeah.
Currently, right now, VA is the highest paying over FHA and everybody else. They set their own fees.
Yeah.
And they've gone up every 2 years. This is the only time they haven't gone up. The last time they went up was 2020 or 2021. And they have not changed it since.
Okay.
Now, whether they go back down now that everything's kind of stagnant, but when COVID hit and everything was crazy, people paying $100,000 over, they started raising fees.
Yeah.
So right now, I think VA for our area is $675, $150 for a final inspection.
And that's on new construction, final inspection, or to go back on a
Or even on a
subject to-
repair inspection.
Yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Okay, cool. Okay, awesome.
Yeah, and they set the fee.
Yeah.
So it's not like we get to say, hey, this is what I want to charge,
Yeah.
where you can on FHA conventional.
Yeah, yeah. Well, with that being said, though, I mean, it makes sense. 650, 675, because we asked for 650 on appraisals, like conventionals and stuff like that. I mean, gas has gone up, grocery bills have gone up. I mean, all these things have gone up. So it just makes sense that appraisals have to go up with it. Inflation, Bidenomics, unfortunately. But
I will, I mean, if somebody calls me and they say, hey, I've got a conventional loan, can you do it? I'm like, okay, what's the fee? And if it's like in my backyard and I've done
Yeah.
a ton over there, a lot of times I can play with that fee. I can discount it some because it's really going to be a slam dunk.
Yeah.
You know, hey, I just did one over there 2 weeks ago. It's the same floor plan, not a problem. You know,
Yeah.
and I'll reduce it. Or if I've got a good relationship, we can do stuff like that.
Like a special
My
loan.
biggest problem with the AMCs was, well, like I said before, they are asking for stuff. Supposedly they're supposed to review it before it goes to y'all, and then they ask for this, and this, and then they send it to y'all, and then y'all come back and say, okay, we need also this, and this. Well, AMC started asking for stuff that wasn't either Fannie Mae guideline or it violated USPAP.
yeah.
And
Can you explain what USPAP is so people know?
USPAP is Uniform Standards of Appraisal Practice, and that is our law for an appraiser, if you want
Yeah.
to call it that.
Yeah.
We cannot violate USPAP in any way. It trumps everything. It
Yeah.
trumps client requirements on their appraisal. So if they come in and say, this is how we want our appraisals done and structured, if we can do that and still follow USPAP, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But if any of those guidelines violate USPAP, then we can't do that.
Yeah.
We have to follow USPAP, and then
Yeah.
now you will find appraisers that will, if they're slow enough, they'll bend rules and they'll do things like that. And that's why a lot of them get censured or sanctioned, or they get their license pulled, or they get suspended, and they get additional class hours that they have to complete. But that's why I kind of got away from that, because I was like, there's so much stuff going on here that I disagreed with, and you're not paying a reasonable fee.
Yeah. Damn. So what companies do you work with most often, like as an appraisal management company?
I'm signed, so I'm still signed up with everybody, but it would be Lender X, Value Link. Oh, I don't have my computer in front of me.
No, you're good.
There's
you're good.
probably 13 different ones, I think, the last time I counted. And I only get emails from maybe 4 of them.
4 of them. Okay. And then how often are you out doing appraisals? Like, is it like everyday type situation?
No.
or-
I did it every day.
Yeah.
But what the good thing with VA is I get all my orders for that week on Monday.
Oh,
So I can
nice.
plan my whole week.
Okay, perfect.
Before, I'd get like one on Monday, I may get another one on Wednesday, and I may get some more on Thursday, Friday. And if Monday, this one comes in, and let's say it's Fort Worth, and I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of slow. I can go out there and do that tomorrow. So I'll
Yeah.
schedule it, knock it out. Wednesday, I get another one in White Settlement or Euless. Or I'm like, I could have done it here on
Yeah.
the same day.
Yeah.
So with VA, we get 10 business days. So a lot of time, but we have to call and make the appointment within 48 hours of accepting it.
Okay.
So now that I get everything on Monday, I can plan that whole week.
Oh, nice.
And then if I get a one trickle in from an individual or an agent
Yeah.
or an AMC, then
Yeah.
I can tack that in somewhere if I need to.
What's the turn time usually for you to do an appraisal?
Depends on where it's located.
Let's just say you're able to, from the time that you can get an inspection done.
I can do one in as quick as 6 hours.
Oh,
if
wow.
it's close.
Okay. Yeah.
Measuring is the longest that it takes. And then when you sit down and do the report, it takes maybe an hour and a half if you have the data for that neighborhood.
Yeah.
If you've done, like if it's a brand new neighborhood, I don't have anything, I got to re-pull everything from MLS, highs, lows, ages, what is typical for concessions in that area. Does it that all goes on page 1.
Yeah.
So-
And that's for VA. What's the typical for concessions, right? Or do you do that for everything?
So for our guidelines, it's anything that exceeds 6%, we adjust for.
Oh, wow.
I know some appraisers that if there's any concession at all, he's adjusting.
Okay.
And you're not supposed to do that.
Okay.
They say if it's customary for that market and that particular subdivision, and they say you're seeing anything from $4,000 to like $8,000, and all of your comps have paid that, why would you make that adjustment? Because it's showing you that it's typical. Now, if you've got 5 comps and not one of them paid seller concessions, and then you have one that they paid $24,000, then you can say, hey,
okay, we got a problem.
Right.
We got to make an adjustment. Okay. So, with an appraisal, what is probably in your, doing appraisals this whole time? Like, what is the thing that you probably had to readjust or change most often? Like early on when you first started getting into appraisals, like you went out and did an appraisal, like, oh man, I missed that, or I need to address that, or I need to make sure I remember to do that. You know what I'm saying?
Are you referring to the inspection process, or are you referring to like when I fill out reports?
Like when you did reports, like what were some of the common issues that you ran into early on in your career when you were doing appraisals?
One of the biggest things I used to get dinged on was how the photos were taken. That was a big thing.
Really?
FHA come out where now they want when you take a comparable photo, they want you to take it at an angle where you can catch some of the side. I don't know what the purpose of that's for, but that's what they want. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. Like on a townhome, obviously you can't do that. Or if you're on 0 lot lines, you can't really get a good angle. VA requires both side photos on everything.
Regardless, okay.
But again, townhome, you can't do that. But that was the main thing that I had to adjust for on how I inspect and how I take photos. Probably the only other thing is missing rooms. Like you'll see a door and you automatically think, like if it's under the stairs, well, that's a closet. Well, it could be a half bath. Yeah. So I have missed half baths before early on when I was going through training, things like that. But like I said, everybody's human. Yeah. You're going to miss some stuff. Yeah. The biggest fault that we get is there's a lot of people in our industries that believe I said this and this is the way it's going to be. And that's not the way it should be. Yeah. Like we should all be working together. Yeah. So I try to approach it I treat all my loans, everything that I appraise as if it's VA. I inspect them the same way. I pull comps. I do everything just like I was doing a VA appraisal. That being said, I will also, it's not called Tidewater unless it's VA, but I'll reach out to the lender and say, hey, you have a problem if I reach out to the agents because I'm having a problem with this. Yeah. Now, I didn't discuss value, so I didn't say, hey.
Yeah. Exactly.
So it's kind of a fine line. But at least I feel like I made the effort to say, what am I missing? Because there's something way wrong here.
Yeah.
Especially in today's market.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I brought that up is, we'll get an appraisal back and we have an underwriting for just appraisals, right? So we have an underwriter that reviews it, sees if there's any changes that need to be made. They don't necessarily tell us what the changes are that they requested to be made, but they send it back. And I've seen that a lot lately, so I'm like, okay, what is the error that's actually happening on these appraisals? Is it just a clerical error, or is it really botched appraisal? Like, what's happening? So once they've made the repairs, then I get to see the appraisal. Usually before then, I don't get to even see it.
So are you referring to like collateral underwriter?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's another reason why I love doing VA, because those don't get run through collateral underwriter.
Yeah.
Collateral underwriter is this cloud thing in there that has saved appraisals for 10, 15 years. And the premise behind it was they wanted everything to be standardized. So when you submit a report, they take that report and they compare it to every report that they have on file in that area that would be considered comparable. So if I go to a house and I say it's average condition or good condition or updated or remodeled, and they have classification ratings, Q1 or C1, they compare it to what this appraiser did. So it comes back to the opinion. This appraiser, his opinion was this, and his opinion was this. Well, the problem they had and why they started this was you would do an appraisal. Let's say I went out and did a $4 million house, and I called it a C1, which means it's brand new, it's never been lived in, and it's a Q1, meaning it's the highest quality that you can make.
That's okay.
Get. And then I get an appraisal to do, say, a $15 million house. Is this house still that criteria that this one is at $15 million? They're the same size, but they put in $8 million more upgrades.
Yeah.
So what most appraisers would do is they would go in and they would reuse this property, but they would drop it to a C2.
What?
And so, and they would see that, they go, well, you just did this house and it was a C1 or a Q1, and now you're calling it a C2 or a Q2 or whatever. Why did you change it? And so the problem being that is, even if you stay consistent, then your report doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with this particular property.
Yeah.
So that's where some of the issues for me with collateral underwriter is, when they compare it to this person, they come back at you and say, why did you do this? When this report could be absolute trash.
Yeah.
It could be horrible. It could, like, poor comp selection. They didn't support their adjustments. They didn't explain their adjustments. But you want to come at mine, and they don't read the report fully.
Yeah. Wow, Jesus. So
that's some of my biggest problems.
Do you ever go back to them?
Not reading the report. They'll come back and say, hey, you left off a comment that's required by VA. And I'm like, no, it's on page 3, or it's here, or it's here. Oh, I didn't see that. That's not usually where it's at.
That's
okay,
where
well, there's no requirement on where we put it.
Yeah.
Read the whole report.
Yeah.
That's why we give y'all 20-something pages.
But I mean, that's why it's all that information is all there in the report, is for them to really just kind of go over. Holy Jesus, man. So then here's another question I have. So, you know, and I've never understood why people don't do this, because if I was going to sell a pretty expensive house, let's say $1 million up, I would almost request to have an appraisal done, right? So that I get a realistic expectation of what it's going to sell for. Now I know, you know, realtors, they try to do like what you're saying and compare previously sold and square footage and bedroom. But again, the realtor doesn't know the quality of that actual home,
Correct.
what actually went into it, what was the actual appraised value came back, you know, what was in that appraisal report. We don't know, right?
Correct.
But if you actually had an appraisal done, let's say by you, which people can hire you to do, they're getting an exact of what a really good appraiser would appraise this house for, and what you should expect, almost 100% certainty that that's what you're going to get for the home in the market, almost. If I'm not.
That's incorrect.
Okay.
That's incorrect.
Perfect.
Appraisal is more so for the bank.
Okay.
Even for an individual, and I preface this, if I have an individual call me, or I have a agent call me and say, hey, I've got somebody that wants to get an appraisal.
Okay.
First thing I tell them is, I have zero problem doing an appraisal. And I will tell you, me personally, I'm going to appraise it as if I'm doing it for a bank. Mm-hmm. But what you have to realize is, that does not mean that that's what that house is going to sell for.
Okay.
That's what it's worth.
Yeah.
But that's not what it's going to sell for.
Yeah.
So, and I see that a lot of times where I'll have agents call me, and even if I don't do the appraisal, they'll say, hey, I got an appraisal back, X amount of dollars. And when I look it up, I wasn't even close to that number. So I'm like, I don't know how they're going to get there. That seller's happy, great, we got an appraisal, they put it on the market, and it sits there for 90 days, 180 days, and they just keep dropping it.
Yeah.
And then now the seller's pissed because they're like, well, I have an appraisal. I'm like, you have to understand, these people may not want to pay that for it. Doesn't mean it's not worth it.
Yeah,
they don't want to pay it. And there's so many variables with interest rates and things like that could come into play on that, why it's not selling for that.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, that's not what it's going to sell for. It can, but that's not what this appraisal's for.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you what it's worth.
Well, good. I mean, that's good information, because a lot of times, you know, people will come in with an expectation of what they want to sell it for and not get it, and get upset with the realtor, like, hey, you know, this realtor isn't doing a good job. Now, they may not be obviously marketing the house well or whatever, but let's just say they're an amazing realtor group, right? Or an individual realtor, and they put it on the market for what it should go for, and the house doesn't sell. That's not the realtor's fault. The market is dictating, really, if the house is going to sell or not. Whether, like, again, interest rates,
Correct.
Job reports that come out. I mean, you can see if we're going into a recession. I mean, there's so many things at play, right, that dictate whether the house is going to sell or not. So you can't get upset at the appraiser because the house didn't appraise. Not their fault. They are appraising it, as long as it's a good appraisal, right? Or the realtor, if it doesn't sell, as long as they're doing their job, because, I mean, shit, you have no control over that. I mean, it just is what it is, unfortunately.
Another thing I tell them too is, for an appraisal, and it even states on the appraisal, when you look at the section where it says value, this is my opinion.
Yeah.
You can send 5 appraisers out there and they may all do it completely different. You would think they should come up with relatively similar values, but I had one where I appraised it for $8 million. They had a second appraisal. That appraiser came in at $5 million. There was a $3 million difference.
What? No.
So they come back and they say, we need to reconcile this. And I said, okay. Always my first question, did you read my report in its entirety? Did you read all
Probably
my
not.
comments? Everything down even to the land value. They said, yes, we did. I said, okay. Did you read the other person's? They said, yes, that's okay. Where are our differences? They said, well, y'all use the exact same comps. And I said, I don't understand how that's possible. I said, I included land value to show you that my land alone was worth $6 million. It was in the Park Cities.
Yeah.
I said, I've got land values on the same street where they bought a lot for $6 million. Same size. Can't dispute it. Like there's no way.
Yeah.
And this person comes in at 5, he's below land value.
Wow.
How does he do that?
So they really didn't read the notes. Jesus, man, Joseph. Okay.
And that's why I always tell you, it's an opinion,
Yeah.
but it's an opinion for me that I can support in court.
Yeah.
That's how I approach every appraisal. If I get called to court to say, hey, you appraise this, why did you select this comp? How did you come up with this adjustment? Why did you ignore this comp? Because an appraisal is not just so much what you use, but also why didn't you use these others?
Yeah.
And so back to the VA part, why I like about it when we do Tidewater, if we don't use the comps that they send over, we have to document within that report, these comps were provided, and this is why they're not comparable.
Wow. So have you ever been to court? I didn't even know that was a thing. Really?
Not on one of mine.
Okay.
I've got
As an expert or something?
testimony.
Wow. And what brought that about? I mean,
Taxes.
Really?
It was just for tax litigation.
Really? Like Mar-a-Lago, did you?
I had one that was for a divorce, but I didn't speak at all. Like they brought me in case I needed to, and then it never got to that point. They ended up deciding we'll just agree on the value.
Wow. So what is the most common, for you when you did a government loan outside of a VA, or even I guess a VA, of a repair deficiency, like they need to be fixed? Like, I've had appraisers call out wall plug coverings, right? Needed to be fixed, or rotting wood, or.
The biggest thing is rotted wood. That's the one I see the most, that I call out the most.
Yeah.
Chipped and peeling paint, if it's before, I think it's 71. That's the one I see the most of. What you refer to like on these plugs, if the wires are capped, that's considered safe.
Even with the wall plate missing? Mm-hmm. Really? So I could have went back to that appraiser and be like, what are you talking about? I didn't even know that. Wow, okay. See?
But it doesn't mean that appraiser is not going to say, this is how I interpret what FHA is saying. That's why it's so vague. They leave it up to the appraiser, and they don't pinpoint each individual thing. They say it's broad.
Yeah.
Safety. If that appraiser feels that it's unsafe, he's going to call it out.
So, a lot of, realtors, when they're selling a home, they don't want to accept an FHA loan. And what I try to explain,
VA.
Or VA, yeah. And the reason being is obviously they're a little bit more strict as it pertains to the condition of the property. But if you are selling a home and you believe it's in good, standing, it's good quality home, why would you not accept an FHA loan? I mean, in all reality, so you're worried about an FHA appraisal being tied to the property for 6 months. But if it's in good quality, you should accept it. But if you're a buyer and the seller doesn't want to accept an FHA loan, what does that tell you?
Something about the house.
Yeah, right. And I try to explain that to my buyers. I'm like, listen, if they don't want to accept that, there's an issue somewhere that you're not seeing that either an inspector is going to pick up, if you have a good inspector, which we both agree that should happen, or the appraiser is going to pick up. So, yeah, I would just say forget it, right? Unless you really want to do it, then maybe think about doing a renovation loan or something.
That's one thing I hate about, and I don't know if it's like this because this is on y'all's end, it's not on our end, but like with the FHA and conventional, do y'all is a inspection mandatory? Because it's not with VA. A lot of times they'll say we didn't want to pay the money to get it, and then it falls back on us. But we're not inspectors.
Yeah, and that's the thing is you guys aren't inspectors, and I think that the inspection is a crucial aspect of the whole process to get. I had somebody buying a Redfin house, and they skipped the inspection process, bought the house, the whole 9 yards, and then found out later, because an appraiser didn't pick this up either, which they're not required, right? So that there was a huge issue with the roof and how it was tied to the rest of the home. I can't remember the exact details with it. It was so bad that Redfin ended up having to come back and buy the home from them because of the issue, the glaring issue that it was. But although the buyer ended up getting their money back and doing all this, they had to go through a lot of stress of obviously moving out of a home, moving into another, fighting with Redfin, all of these things, getting us as a lender involved. They're like, what can you do? That's not us. That's you guys. Inspection, appraisal, like all of these things. We got checks and balances, and you skipped the most crucial part, which was a home inspection. You would have got that inspector would have picked that up, done deal, right? So yeah, they skipped it. But anyways, it's a lot of stress, and that inspection, $500, $600, whatever, the cost is well worth the stress to get that done. And you cannot rely on an appraiser to go through and do that. I mean, you're not a roofer, you're not a plumber, right? You know about some of these things, right? Like, hey, I see this, maybe, but that is not your job. You are
when I first started appraising back in 01, on FHA, we had what was called a VC sheet, and you literally picked out everything.
Yeah.
You had to call out holes in the wall, torn carpet, stained carpet, everything. All that had to be done. Then they finally said, we're having issues with getting people to take out FHA loans because of all the hoops they have to jump through. So they kind of backed it off and was like, okay, we'll just do these 3 categories: the safety, sellability, and structural integrity.
Yeah.
So that was some of the issues with where there's some stuff that's not going to be caught at all, or we catch it, but we can't call it out, because the minute we call it out, a lot of times, at least with VA, they come back and say, you can't call that out.
Yeah.
We can't make recommendations on a VA. It has to be, you either require it to be repaired or you don't say anything about it at all.
Really?
Because like if we go to a house and let's say, I think that there's some foundation issues going on, but I'm not a foundation guy.
Yeah.
I'm not an inspector, but it's obvious. You got cracks, not only outside, but inside, and they're angled, they're on corners of windows. You're like, there's something going on here. We can't recommend a structural engineer's report on a VA. You can require them to repair the foundation.
Yeah.
But what we've also found out is at that point, when it goes to the lender, it's the lender's job to certify whether that needs to be done or not.
Yeah.
Because I've sent some in with a ton of repairs, never got asked to do a final.
Wow. They probably bailed on the home. I mean, to be honest. You go back and you see they moved in, you're like, what in the world? Really?
I've been sent out to do a final when they've been there for like 3 weeks.
Really? Well, I have to ask another question. So I work with some custom home builders, right? Cody Clark being probably one of my favorite right now, but Cody Clark. So he's a local builder.
Okay.
Custom homes, right? So, we talk about quality all the time and new construction, right? So do you see, in your opinion, you don't have to call any big box builders out, but do you see a difference in quality yourself as an appraiser when you're going through? It's a huge
100%.
difference, right? So even though, let's say Cody Clark sells a home for $600,000, then a big box builder sells a home for $600,000, that Cody Clark home, right? Or, there's another Elijah Anthony, he does some homes too. That $600,000 home is far nicer than the other. And what I try to explain to people, and I don't know if you know this or see it, but when you do like a DR Horton home, sorry, I'm going to call you guys out on this one, but
That's when you said don't call it. That's the first one I was going to go with.
So I get frustrated with
I don't know how many
this.
lawsuits they got on right now,
But this is the part that I get extremely frustrated with, and you're seeing it right now. So they're promoting 3.99% interest rate, okay? So the Fed fund rate is in the 5s. How in the world is anyone getting to 3.99?
I have no clue.
Well, this is what they're doing. You know the quality of home that they're buying. Well, they own their lending company, right? Well, the lending company can take a huge loss, but somebody has to buy down the rate. So who do you think's buying down the rate? Because the builder isn't actually buying down the rate. You are. You paid a premium for this house, way over, with all this added profit in there to get your rate all the way down to 3.99, right? Well, so you're getting a subpar home in comparison to another $600,000. You just paid for the rate, and you're like, "Well, they gave me $3." No, they didn't give it. You bought it. And then what inevitably ends up happening, and I keep preaching this, is that values keep ticking up, and who cares about values?
You know why that's happening?
Huh?
You know why that's happening?
Well, there's a few things why values keep ticking up.
I can give you my opinion.
Well, let's give it. Yeah, come on. That's what this is about.
So, and this is from reviewing a lot of appraisals. When COVID hit, you have these developments where you'll have 6 or 7 builders. And within that, 2 of them are what we call cookie cutter, track, volume. They build a house in 73 days, start to finish.
Yeah, Jesus.
That's how. And then you've got people like builders, let's say Drees, Highland, Perry Homes, and their homes, more quality, they take longer, they put a lot more upgrades in them.
Yeah.
Well, when COVID hit, appraisers were going out there and saying they're in the same subdivision, they're comparable.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I've seen a DR Horton home in Prosper that when it first sold in like 14 or 15 was like in the 3s. It sold for over $1 million during COVID.
Yeah, no. Seriously.
God.
Yeah.
And this goes back to when we were talking about those AVMs where they're looking at distance. Well, all your comps are right here, but they're not the same.
Yeah.
And that's why the UAD came along and said, okay, well, we need to do quality ratings.
Yeah.
What is Q1? What is Q2? What is Q3? And the definitions are in an appraisal. So I always tell people, if you can read that appraisal, read it.
Yeah.
Get your hands on as many as you can. Look at the definitions and look at what this appraiser did. So once that started happening, now you've got somebody saying, I've got a deal, I got $1 million house. Like, no, you really don't. Like, you don't even have crown molding in your house.
Yeah. So do you think that appraisals will become better to start picking these homes apart and separating them essentially?
They should. That's what should happen. When you go into, you say, okay, I'm going to call my house, let's say a D.R. Horton. Most of those subdivisions, they're going to be a Q4 or Q5, which they say builder grades with no upgrades. LGI Homes is a prime example. You go in, you can't upgrade anything in an LGI home.
Yeah.
You can do color changes, but that's why their models are, this plan is this price, period. And you can tell it when you pull up MLS, they'll have 40 homes of that plan that there's not $1,000 difference between them. Except every 3 months they raise it $3,000. Every 3 months they raise it $3,000. Every 3 months they raise it $3,000. And you can prove it. So when you have something like that,
Jesus.
you can say, hey, I can show the appreciation and I can make those time adjustments if they fall in that category. And they're all the same quality.
Yeah.
But when you start incorporating these other builders,
Yep.
Rockwall, prime example. If I've saw people that used Kensington Park and compared it to Kingsbridge.
Okay.
Well, Kensington Park was Altura, that whole subdivision.
Yeah.
Kensington Park is no volume builders. They're all custom builders.
Jesus.
Gated development, why would you go there? Because their subdivisions touch each other? No,
Yeah.
we're not comparing apples to apples.
Yeah. Well, the point I was trying to make before is the taxman cares about the value. They
Yes.
love it, right? So people complain about taxes in the state of Texas. They're high. So my parents or my mom and my stepdad, they live
But their
in California.
process is completely different. They do what's called ad valorem appraisal process, where we're a fee simple process.
Yeah.
So they take an area and then they average it.
Yeah. But that sucks for everybody. Like I was saying, so my parents are from California. Taxes are very different. They've been looking to move here to Texas, right? So some more California people come in, right? So we gotta love that. So sorry, I'm from California, so I can say that. So originally, I've been here since 2001. So they look at taxes, and my mom was like, Jesus Christ. And I'm like, yeah, it's high. And they keep ticking up because these big box builders are seriously running up the prices. I mean, they really are. And appraisers aren't, obviously not all appraisers, but they're not calling out the differences. There is a huge difference in quality. And I really believe eventually there is going to be something that is set that says, hey, listen, this was a big box builder. The plan was just regurgitated over and over, and this is a Cody Clark home. There's a $200,000 difference in this home. I know they're both 4,000 square feet, right? But they don't have granite, blah, 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 all that fun stuff. So with that being said, I got to go back to the appraisal side of things. And so this wasn't a thing when I was a kid, concrete flooring, right? So let's say the house had carpet before, and let's just say it's run down, and they just rip the carpet up in the tack strips, and they don't finish it. Are you going to call that out as an appraiser saying the unfinished floors, or what's going to happen? Because concrete floors are now a thing.
It's supposed to be sealed.
Okay,
They have
but
to be
you
sealed.
check that.
They have to be sealed or painted.
Okay, perfect.
I have not verified it yet, but I had another appraiser because on the forum on Facebook made a comment that he saw where paint is no longer acceptable.
Really?
That has to be sealed.
Okay. Yeah, I was always curious.
Is
of that.
epoxy not paint in it? I mean, in a way,
Yeah, I did. Well, I mean, I think it's a little harder. I think, and it doesn't flake
it
because
should be. But when we go out there, how do we determine that?
there's no
I
way.
don't- no.
You're not an inspector. You're not a professional. Exactly. So
Exactly.
how are you supposed to know that? Jesus.
So all we care about is when we go out, because I just had one in Crum, same way. They pulled everything up, but they left the tack strips.
Oh yeah, you call that out real quick.
I had to call it out. And she was
Perfect.
like, why? I'm like, it's a safety issue. You can't walk in that house without cutting your foot all up.
Yeah.
I said, and the floor needs to be sealed.
Wow. So how often? I got a couple things. How often do you see foundation issues with homes in the state of Texas?
Depends on the area. Some areas I've never seen a cracked one, and there's some areas that I know when I get that order, then it's going to have foundation issues.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay. And then what is the most common questions that you get from lenders like me, obviously, or borrowers or realtors, what are some common things that you get asked about appraisals that I'm missing, right? That I've kind of just blew over.
Probably like what you were talking about, what's going to be called out if, we got a contract and it's FHA. What are some things that we're going to have to look at going into that?
And what are those things?
Safety, structural. For me as an appraiser, like I said, I'm going to go look at, we'll measure. So we do the outside, we look for chip and peeling paint, we look for rotted fascias, soffits. If we can see the roof, we'll look at the roof. Is there any missing shingles? Does it look really, really bad? Then we can say, hey, the roof needs to be replaced.
But you're not getting up on a roof.
No.
Exactly.
We do not get on.
Exactly.
Absolutely not.
Good,
we
good.
will, on FHA, we do look into the attic. Used to, it was just head and shoulders. Now, if you can safely access the attic, they want you to, as much as possible, and you have to include a photo.
Is this your attic attire? It's really thin,
No.
light? I'm just kidding.
And same thing with crawl spaces for pier and beam houses.
You got to crawl in a crawl space?
No, I do head and shoulders.
Head, shoulder, okay.
Take a photo, and then same thing on mobile homes.
Yeah.
We take photos under there, make sure the wheels are removed, make sure the tongue is removed off the front. You look for certain plates and labeling on those.
Exactly.
So
HUD
it just
plates,
kind of depends
all that.
on the property itself and the loan type that what we're going to be looking for.
Yeah. Cracked windows, obviously, for FHA loans.
So for that, if your fingernail doesn't hang on it, you don't call it out.
Oh, really? Okay. I didn't know that.
They're saying you can't cut yourself, so it's not a safety issue.
hazard. Okay. Perfect.
Because I've called them out before when they're like white, like you can tell the seal broke.
Seal broke, yeah.
And I've called out and said, hey, the seal's broke. It's not protecting. We need to replace that. And they said, you can't call it out. It's not a safety issue.
Oh, that's good to know because I didn't know that at all. Jesus, Mary and Joseph. So on homes, like manufactured homes, like you were saying, how do you confirm for yourself that it's been permanently affixed? All that? Like, what are you looking for in that situation?
That label, it's the HUD data plate.
Okay.
It'll tell you when it was moved.
Okay.
And then we confirm it with tax.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
So if it says, hey, this was manufactured in October of 21, and it shows that it was shipped from the dealership, let's say January of 22, we look at tax. What does tax say the year built is? 22. That's what we do. Okay, it's been there and has not been moved.
Yeah, perfect. Wow, man. So, because I do a lot of manufactured homes now, so it's kind of a big thing.
And if I remember correctly, I think VA is the only one that will allow you to, if it's been moved, they'll still finance it.
So now there's some non-QM products out there, which, my team, we do a lot of non-QM products, which is nice because, we're running into a situation where you can't get an FHA loan because the home has been moved. We can actually do them moved more than once, which has been great.
Right.
Obviously it has to have an engineer's report to make sure it's been permanently affixed and everything is good to go on that aspect. But yeah, we can now do them, but it's non-QM. So there's pretty much a loan for every house out there. I mean, honestly. It's just your lender has to have access to that broker product, be well versed with that broker to get the deal done. Otherwise, it's going to be a shit show, unfortunately, which happens a lot when somebody's like, oh yeah, I can do it. And then they pull their hair out, unfortunately. So yeah, we actually have access to
that's
that.
good.
So it's been really good. Inspectors that you would recommend, do you recommend any inspectors when you're out doing that?
I've never dealt with any inspectors.
Never?
This whole time.
Never, really?
I think I've been to one inspection since 2001. There was an inspector there, and he was on the phone the whole time. So most of the time, I don't ever deal with him.
Yeah, the reason why I was asking that, when you go out there, you're like, hey, did you guys have an inspection done?
Well, I always ask for it.
Yeah.
I never get it, but I always ask for it.
They never give you the inspection? Why?
Because
they're worried.
99% of the time it's VA, and they don't want to pay for it.
Oh, really?
So he said, I didn't get one.
Man, that's insane. Okay, well, shit. Well, damn.
Oh yeah.
That's crazy.
They're like, well, you're going to look at all that stuff, right? No.
Yeah, no, not at all.
It's like FHA, we were required to check appliances. We turned stove on, make sure it was functional. All this stuff. We don't do that anymore.
Really?
Present, and that's.
If the power's not on or utilities aren't on, that's still an
FHA
issue.
is required.
Yep.
VA, we just document whether it is or not.
Done.
We can't require final if the meter's not set, or they haven't put in the gas meter, or power wasn't quite on yet. We just document. Was it on or was it not? That's it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we pretty much covered, I think, most of what we run into as a lender and as an appraiser for the most part. So how do people get a hold of you if they want to get a hold of you? So cell phone, email?
Email's probably the easiest. Anthony at sizemore.appraisals.com. Cell phone 469-682-3918.
Perfect.
I get a lot of agents that call just to ask questions. They've got a particular loan that they're having issues with, or a property that, what do you think? And I give them my opinion without actually giving them a value.
Yeah.
Because legally, if I spout off a value, I have completed an appraisal.
Really?
And which means by law, I have to have a work file, save it, even if I don't even do an appraisal. They call me and I tell them, I think this home's worth 1.4. I verbally just told you that as an appraisal, and I better have a work file if they call and say, hey, he told me this, and then the talc board calls me and says, we need to come down here, we need to see your work file, because you said it was worth this.
Yeah.
Just from a phone conversation.
I mean, I honestly, I have never spoken with an appraiser that knows as much about their profession as you do. Now, they're obviously probably out there, but I've never had the luxury of getting to talk to them.
The weird thing about ours is you're always, and I think it's probably in any
Industry. Same thing with agents. When you brought up, good agents, most of the time, what I see is an agent goes out and they do a pre-listing appointment. They say, hey, I think I can sell your house for this.
Yeah.
And that this particular seller is interviewing agents. That next agent comes in and says, oh no, we can get way more. And they list it and it sits for 6 months.
Yeah.
My problem that I have with that is there's no accountability on that agent.
Yeah. Yeah.
where
Exactly.
I can be sued on my value
Yeah.
if I can't support it.
Yeah.
Where this person can say, we can do this, and they don't, there's no recourse for that.
And I think that's the important part of working with, obviously a lender or a realtor who really cares about their job, is always learning new things, tries to stay up on the market, and does a good job, and they're shooting you straight. Sometimes you might think that, a lender or a realtor is kind of just being shitty, like, oh, it's not going to sell for that.
Right.
They're just being honest. They do a ton of production, and if you want to know what production a realtor is doing, or hell, even a lender, you can find that information out pretty easily. I mean, hell, if you want to work with a realtor, I know a ton of realtors that are really good, and I can look up their production. I can tell you, and this realtor does 30 transactions a year. This other realtor hasn't done one since 22. Like, who do you want to work with? I'm going with the guy that did 30.
I blame a lot of stuff on COVID, because I'm like, COVID made a lot of lazy agents.
And lenders, don't get that.
All they had to do was say, they put a sign in the yard, and that home,
Was
they didn't
gone.
even have to show it.
Yeah.
And there were people paying for that house. I did a home in Allen. It was a VA, matter of fact.
They had it listed for $860,000.
Yeah.
When it got sent to me, when they finally sent the contract over, the contract was for $1.1 million.
And I was like, wow. Like, this is the height of where everybody's overpaying.
Yeah.
But that was excessive.
So I started pulling comps, and I'm like, initiated Tidewater. And the first comment I got back from the listing agent was, I don't know how you're even going to get to my list price.
Yeah.
Much less the contract price. She was honest.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I respect that.
Yeah.
Like, if you tell me, hey, this is what they wanted, I told them, probably not, or it's going to go way over, we just do this, that's fine. But it's the ones that they die on this hill, and you've proven them wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong again. I ended up appraising it for $760. So $100 less than the list price. They had a waiver in there that he was going to pay the difference no matter what.
Yeah.
On a VA.
Yeah. Oh my
And I'm
gosh.
like, oh my God.
And you can answer this. When I first started, when I got on VA, I was informed then that VA was the #1 foreclosed loan of all.
Over
I honestly
FHA,
don't
over
know that.
conventional, over USDA.
And the only thing I can think of is because there's so much 100%, plus you tack on the 3% finance charge, and then if VA decided, hey, this appraisal might have been a little low, so we're going to up your value, and then now you can't pay for it.
If that is factual, and I can't confirm that right now, but I'll look. It's going to be, in my opinion, the fact that VA loans do not have a debt to income ratio threshold. So,
Okay, see, I saw a post the other day where they said it was like at 60 something. It was the highest, but it wasn't.
there is no restriction. So I'll explain. So conventional right, it was used to be like 43% or something crazy like that. Well, it's actually 49.99. I've gotten approvals up to that point. Once you pass 50 or hit 50, conventional just doesn't work. FHA, I've run them up as high as 56.99%. Once you hit 57, they don't work. That is the threshold for that. Now, that doesn't guarantee approval, right? There are a lot of other factors that play into that. Now, as it pertains to a VA loan, there's no guideline that states that there's a ratio restriction. And it really depends on the residual income calculation for that. And I've actually got in the 70s a loan to approve.
Wow.
So we're talking on the home, their debt to income ratio is 70+% and the loan's still running approved. Well, what do you think is going to happen? Most likely, it's going to get foreclosed on because this person can't make the payment, because inevitably what ends up happening is that you're going to see taxes go up, insurance go up, and so now that debt to income ratio keeps creeping up. So what I like to tell my borrowers, just because you can afford it right now, doesn't always mean you should buy, right? If you genuinely can afford it, then yeah, buy, but just because the loan says it works, should you be going to 56.99 on an FHA or 70% on a VA? Probably not. I mean, I wouldn't advise it, but that's up to you. You make the call.
And like you said,
I work for you, and I'm not going to tell you yes or no, but just think about it. I mean, how high do you want to make this run? So base it on payment. If you can afford the payment comfortably, let's go. No matter what the interest rates are, because interest rates, they fluctuate. So can you afford it now? Buy, and then when rates drop or whatever happens, refinance down, right? Knowing that down the road, taxes are going to keep climbing up, insurance is going to keep climbing up, and if you're comfortable with the payment before, you might be able to, hopefully be comfortable with it as it slowly increases, because hopefully your income increases at the same time. But there's no guarantee. So with that being said, like VA loans, we get some crazy stuff done with VA loans. It's wild.
I didn't know that.
That's so insane. Wild. But that's the thing. And so that's another thing. Is a lot of people, a lot of realtors, they'll repost some lender's information like, 43% debt to income ratio up to 43. Well, that's not factual. Or another thing I see all the time is FHA 100% financing. I get asked that all the time. That is literally not a thing.
There is not USDA still 105?
So USDA is 100% financing, right?
Okay.
FHA is 96.5%, right?
When I first started in USDA loans, it was 105%.
Well, so you can get down payment assistance, right? Which inevitably is your FHA 100% financing. So you're still doing the FHA guideline of 3.5% down, but you're using down payment assistance to fill in the gap, right? To get your 3.5%. Well, you can do a combined or CLTV, combined loan to value, with down payment assistance over 100%. So like 105 or something like that, right? With down payment assistance. But that's this FHA 100% financing. So you're getting a lender, being a used car salesman, saying, I can get you this deal. So I get called all the time. Hey, I want that 100% financed FHA loan. I'm like, down payment assistance? No. The 100% financing one. Yeah, that's down payment assistance. No, it's not. This other lender said, I'm telling you that this is the guideline. That's not really a thing. It's just down payment assistance. Or I need the first-time homebuyers program. Well, that's down payment assistance. It's just down payment assistance. Most often, T-Shack, Seth, TDHA, it's just down payment assistance that they market as a first-time homebuyers program or just for teachers. And there might be a small discount like for some of their fees, but that same assistance is still available to whether a first-time homebuyer or somebody who's bought 10 homes, right? It's still available to them. So just use car salesman tactics, unfortunately, and just misinformation out there all over the place. That's why it's important to work with a lender, an appraiser, a realtor who genuinely knows the business and has been in a long time.
That's the key.
You do that, you honestly will not be steered wrong. They'll help you grow your real estate portfolio. They're going to be with you every step of the way, and you're not going to be pissed off. You're going to be like, okay, this was a nice transaction, right, overall. So
that's good to know, because I know a lot of them are like, I just need to get this loan closed. And like you were saying, I don't advise you to go to your max if you don't have to.
Yeah.
But if it's a situation where like you're dead set, I have to have a house, I got to get in here, I'm willing to do this, and then we'll deal with it later. That's a different story.
Yeah, and when I do my consultation calls, we go over payment. We talk about these things. I'm like, are you comfortable with the payment? Well, what about the interest rate? Well, it's the payment is really the most important thing, right? Let's talk about the payment, and we'll figure out the interest, because that moves all the time. Every day it moves. Right. But you want your payment to be $2,500. That's the goal, right? So at $2,500, this house, at $300,000 will be this, or this house at $350,000 will be this, depending on what you're buying, like all of the variables, because we're focused on that payment. If you focus on a purchase price and an interest rate, you don't know what the hell that payment's going to end up being the time you sign a contract. Like we have no idea. It's going to
How
be
many, I'm going to ask you this because I had this situation, one happened to me back in 01, 02, and it happened to my stepson. How many times, what is your process on new construction where the taxes are not established?
So a lot of lenders, they do this, and it's frustrating. They will put the taxes super low to make the payment look
Because
very
what's
attractive.
showing on tax, we're showing it's just a lot.
It's just a lot, unimproved lot.
And
so
then
not
they end up
improved.
having their escrow short.
Yep.
So that's what I was trying to figure out.
So what we
for
do-
VA, and this is what pissed me off.
Because I actually did his appraisal. And I estimate the taxes. And usually 99% of the time, it's high. So I will take the sales price by whatever that rate is.
Exactly.
I don't factor in homestead exemption. I don't factor in disability. I don't factor any of that kind of stuff. So realistically, that tax should be high.
Yeah.
That's required from us on VA on new construction. So that was where I was curious. It was like, if you know this information, you know what that payment should be. How's your escrow short $9,000?
Well, that's lenders doing that. They're just trying to get somebody into a home. What I will tell people is I always estimate taxes high. Worst case scenario, I just ensures approvability. Or, if I know a general area, I'll put the interest rate a little high because we never know what the market's going to do, generally speaking. Last week we had a huge rate drop, right? Well, if I would send an approval on what the current rate is, what you qualify for, well, let's say rates tick back up, which they did a little bit yesterday. Well, the loan may not work now. So when I send you a pre-approval, let's say I put 7%, although I qualified you at 6.125. I put it 7% because if you don't buy a house for 3 months, there's still approvability here. We're still okay. We're still going to work it out.
Right.
And as it pertains to taxes, I have the option to put the taxes lower, right? But I have to tell you, hey, this is going to potentially run into an escrow shortage. I had that situation come up on somebody who bought in downtown Dallas. I was like, we're going to do this to help you out. It's going to lower your cash to close because that's all a part of cash to close. But just know your escrow is going to be short. Most often what I'll do though is do it off the tax rate. I will include the homestead exemption when we do the calculations, and we'll get with title just make sure everything's right with that. But homestead exemption, and then when we close, I'm hounding them like, you need to do this homestead exemption because it's a pretty sizable credit. After this is how you do it with the county, so on and so forth. Get that thing filed. Now it's up to them. If they file it, I'm not going to file it for them. The title company's not going to file it for them. So if they don't do it, guess what happens? Escrow shortage. And then they got to come up with the difference. So again, working with a lender who's not trying to sell you a freaking loan. They want to have a relationship with you for life. They want to be your lender for life, which I do. I want to have these relationships with my realtor partners, with my borrowers, where they come back to me knowing that, well, Rick was very transparent, very honest about the whole situation. May not be what I like to hear every time, but it's honest. And I didn't get caught with my pants down essentially and have to pay $5,000 at the end of the year on taxes because I was short, because this lender, kind of played a trick on me.
I was always curious about that because, I've always
Heard different sides of the story. But one excuse I got told was the house on taxes was worth $2 something, but he was paying like $400,000 or $500,000. Well, the minute he closes, tax now has record of that. If you went to a realtor and it's public record, where now your value now just went to
$500,000.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, why did it go up?
You just proved to them that was worth that to you.
Yeah,
That's market value.
Yeah. Not it doesn't always happen. So every county is a little different, unfortunately,
I know there's the whole 10% cap thing or whatever.
with the homestead. But once they sell the
No,
property,
the
it's
cap.
10% only with homestead. If there's
Oh,
no
okay.
homestead, there's no real threshold. So if you don't file your homestead, they're going to run that up, whatever the market is dictating for them, or what they determined it to
That I
be.
didn't know.
Homestead exemption puts a cap on that in each county. Like I said, is a little different. There's a county, B County, that I do loans for, which is in South Texas, and they are cut off from MLS. So I can't look up the production for any realtors in the area. Nothing. And the taxes is the most wild thing to me. They don't really reassess taxes, but every 2 years or so. And it's the craziest thing. So somebody's taxes will stay low forever. And I'm like, I don't know. I really don't know what to
I
tell
think
you.
Dallas does it every 2 years, but I saw where they were trying to pass a new law here about the tax reassessment, extending it more than just 2 years.
I don't know.
And there was something else about changing on how the appeal process works for appraisals and making the tax office accountable on how they come up with their value.
I think it, yeah, I don't think it needs to increase as quickly as it did, unfortunately. I think, the whole COVID
I'll have to find
situation.
that and send it to you.
Yeah.
Because I was wondering how that was going to affect everything.
Yeah.
I mean,
good
Texas
to
is already hard enough with it being non-disclosure. So you have a ton of sales, especially in the park cities, that you don't have access to.
Yeah.
So, and I get asked that a lot. Hey, can you use this off-market sale? I can if you provide me the settlement statement. If you have any photos on the inside where I can determine that it's the same quality, because I don't want to assume and not make an adjustment or need to make an adjustment. And if I get that information, great, I have no problem using it. If I don't get that information, then I don't use it at all.
Damn. Dude, your job sounds hard. I thought my job was hard, but
it's the same thing with new construction.
everybody hates you.
It's the same thing with new construction.
Yeah.
There is a builder out there, not gonna say the name,
And
You want me to do
big,
it?
Huh?
I'm just joking.
Their big issue that I've always had with them, and I've reported it many times, MLS, if you list a property and it sells, you can't remove it from MLS. You have to disclose what it's sold for.
Yeah.
What they would do is they would list all their property, all these new construction properties they were building. Somebody would come in and they would say, hey, I want to put in a contract on that. They would remove it and then have a contract after that fact. But once it goes under contract. So I reported them on that. So now what they're doing is they're actually changing contract dates to be able to do that. And they'll put one comp in MLS. They may have 40 sales. Because you can look at tax records. This closed, this closed, this closed, this closed, but we don't know what they sold for.
Yeah.
So you go to the builder, hey, I'm interested in getting this property. The information on this, so I can use this as a comp. They cherry pick what they want you to use.
Yeah.
And this particular builder, that one comp they put in MLS, 99% of the time is at least $30,000 to $60,000 higher than everything else that closed in that development.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was bought by a overseas conglomerate agency, whatever they want to be called. But I said that's not a typical market transaction.
I don't know. I'm of the opinion, and I may be wrong, that the builder side of this whole real estate game needs to be more regulated. It is the Wild West with them right now. I mean, as a lender, I can't give credits. I can't push the loan amount up to give you a credit back to get you into a thing. That is illegal. So how in the hell is it okay for a builder to do the same thing? They own the lending company. DHI Mortgage, for example, and I'm sorry.
I just deposited a check for a VA price.
But okay, so again, like I was mentioning before, elevate the price, take a loss on the lending side. It's the same company. How is this legal? This should not be a thing. I mean, $20,000 back in seller concessions. What? Who in the heck is doing this?
And that's for us, like, I was
Working on one in McKinney, and it's DR order. Every one of the comps that they provided me that weren't sold publicly all had between $12,000 and $18,000 in what number that is.
Seller concessions, yeah.
Seller concessions,
Yeah.
prepaids, buy downs or whatever.
But they don't disclose to us what exactly it's for.
Yeah.
So we just lump it all into closing costs and just go with it.
Yeah.
But because all my comps have it,
I have to say, well, that's what the market is. They don't make an adjustment.
So if they are giving you such a huge amount of seller concessions, right? You would think that they're struggling to sell a home or something like that, just trying to move a product, right? Because this is what would happen on a car lot, right? Trying to move a product, they got to give incentives to move a product, right? It's taking away from their profit margin. But that's not happening with these big box builders. Look at the reported profit these big box builders made with all of these seller concessions going. They made more money now, and they're making more money now.
100%.
So what do you think's happening?
Well, because they use the COVID excuse, prices went up. Yes, prices as a whole are up. But I have seen like lumber prices come down, but they didn't lower their prices in their homes.
Nope. Such crazy stuff. It's wild stuff, man. Well, man, I appreciate you as always,
Absolutely.
brother. I do,
Thank you.
man. It's a really good time.